Thank you, sir.
48
Sorry
p.m.
about that, guys. I was real tied up with some residents, pero, well, let's see what we have on this agenda.
Very good. With that, Darlene, will you call the roll, please?
Yes. Commission Chair Apodaca,
Present.
Commission Vice Chair Salazar,
Present.
Commissioner Martinez,
Present.
Commissioner Madrid,
Present.
Commissioner Reiner,
Present.
Commissioner Ludi.
Present.
Very good. See, we have, everybody's accounted for, and we do have a quorum. Can I have a motion approving the agenda?
So move, we approve the agenda with the correction, or the modification that Mayor Trujillo will be at a later date.
Well noted, thank you. Do I have a
Second that.
We have a second, and we have a motion and a second for the approval of the amended agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Public input. Ms. Arguello, do we have anybody that signed up for public input today?
No public input today.
Very good, we can dispense with that item. And we can move along to our discussion items, the charter review. And again, just to reiterate, the mayor had called me yesterday and said that he had something had come up and he wasn't able to attend today. So we'll proceed with Councilor Ulibarri and City Clerk Cassandra. First is Councilor David Ulibarri. Thank you, David, for showing up today. We really appreciate you coming. And we'd like to ask you the same thing that we asked the other councilors. What, in your mind or your perceptions, if any, do you have about any changes or revisions to the city charter?
Our previous administration had Corina, she was working on some items on the charter back like 2-3 years ago. And I don't have I don't have any paperwork of that, what she was doing for the city at that time. But we did have some concerns on some of the items that we discussed it. To go back, I didn't do I didn't put anything on my notes or anything because she was doing it. And what I was thinking of doing is maybe having her to check to see what she had done for us, but I don't know how much she did or she didn't, And my concerns were a little on the mayors and city managers that they were overpowered, or some of the stuff that's on the charter. What I was thinking is that what the charter committee was going to bring to the council, to see what were the changes that you guys wanted to change, because I did study some of it. I didn't study the whole thing because it does take a lot of time, but that's my thinking that, what you guys wanted to bring to the council and see what changes need to be done or need to be changed or, but that, I say that lady, Corina, was working on some stuff for us, but I can't tell you what.
Well, what I can do is ask Mrs. Arguello if she can find any notes that Corina may have left, and perhaps you could provide them to the commission. If they're there, there should be some record.
It's like they have to reserve documents once generated. Cassandra, are you still making use of Google Vault?
I don't think they are.
That should enable a global search of all the emails and communications and documents.
I think I can do a search and get that for us.
Yes, I do know that Ms. Laszlo Henry not only was working on several things with the charter, specifically ordinances that were required by the charter, but were not yet implemented. And I do believe that she had sent drafts to mayor, city manager, et cetera. So it would be really worthwhile to not reinvent the wheel if we could track those down.
That,
And just so, I'm sorry, just so everybody knows who Corina Laszlo Henry is, she was our previous city attorney. Just in case you guys
Okay,
didn't know.
I understand
who
who
he's
she is.
talking
Yes.
about. Yes.
well, with that, and that notwithstanding, just to let you know, Counselor, we have been discussing the charter and going through and kind of coming up with things that we were going to take action on. We haven't taken action on anything yet. There was a couple items that we've come up with, but we haven't taken any action. So until that time, I said, I kind of feel, I'd be remiss to say that we're going to change something when we haven't taken any action, because I don't know what the feelings of the commissioner. I think we have some general ideas, but what we wanted to do is just kind of get, just kind of come off your hip, if you would, and shoot and say, this part we have to look at, or this part we have to look at. Any suggestions at this point? Because the other counselors came through and gave us a general idea, or very pointed ideas of what they thought we should consider changing, or bringing for, not changing, but bringing forth to you as a council some recommendations to change. So it'll come to, we'll vote on some stuff and get it together and bring it to council when it's ready, to have you vote whether it's worthy or not to go before the voters, because it still has to go to the voters. And so I think that we had some interesting comments last time, and they were basically around the same areas, by your fellow councilors. And, what's the wishes of the commission as far as discussing with the council? I want to plant any seeds, but
I'd really like to hear what he has to say, because, otherwise, it might be something we've already looked at, or maybe it's something we haven't looked at.
No, what I was telling you guys, when 2 years ago, we did look at some stuff that Corina was doing for us, but it was so, stuff wasn't going right at the city offices, so she did something and she didn't get back to the council on that, but I don't know what she was working on, to tell you the truth, there were some concerns on the charter, but it never got to,
Was there something,
it didn't get to anywhere.
was there something you expressed to her specifically that you were concerned about?
They're looking at the power of the mayor, how much power she had, and the city
And
manager.
that's something that the others had concerns of too, so
Right.
it's not new.
Right. So those are the most two things that they were looking, that she was looking at, how much power that the mayor had, or in the city manager, That's what kind of my concerns a little bit there too, so. But the thing is, since we got, now that we have a charter committee, and you guys are looking into I'm pretty sure you're looking into half of the charter, or whatever you're looking at, To be specific with you guys, I can tell you, what you guys are really, which items you're working on, that way I can look at it and go from there, because if I tell you, hey, if I say, we're looking at how much power our mayor's got and our city manager also.
one of the things, aside from that, because that was one of the things that other councilors had brought forth, and that's one of the things that we had discussed as a commission, and we just haven't taken formal action on it yet, but it has been discussed, and we did have those comments that were brought to us by the other councilors, so you're not alone.
Right.
Everybody was looking specifically at Article 3, and specifically Section 3.3, or 3.002, the powers and duties of the mayor. So
Right.
we've discussed that at length, and as to what, and we'll have to meet as a commission and come up with exactly what we want to, what we would recommend. One of the other things, and I'll kind of, let me see if I can dance around this. One of the things that's been brought to my attention by the community, and we've discussed it, and other councilors have discussed it, was the number of, the number of councilors that you have. Do you see any problems you know, that we had an 8-member council, now we've gone to 4. Do you see that as a problem, or do you see?
I do see it as a problem because I think with this administration now, as the mayor and 4 councilmen, we're working a lot better. We're working together. You know, I think if we get 8 councilmen, I think it would be say it comes to a vote, you know, there might be 5 that will go for the vote and the other 3 won't, you know. The way I'm looking at it now that, you know, this administration's working a lot together. That we're doing a lot better than the previous administration. So I can see that we could have 8. They did bring it to my attention about 8 councilmen, but I think what we're doing with this administration now, and my think, I don't think we need 8 councilmen. It's up to the charter, and maybe it's up to the people here in Las Vegas, you know, if they do want 8 councilmen. What I'm looking at is, you know, we do get paid. You know, we're gonna get 4 more councilmen in there. If it goes that way, it's gonna cost the city a little more. We have a lot of problems in the city with our streets, you know, all kinds of problems, not only streets, you know. That's gonna take a little more money from the budget or whatever it's gonna take from, you know, to make decisions. And with the decisions that we're making now, I think that they're real powerful. We're going the right way. You know, I don't have any problems with this administration or anything that I could say that we're going the wrong way, or there's always things that we need to take care of. You know, there's a lot. The city's got a lot of we have a lot of employees. We have a lot of directors. You know. So you know we're working very, very strong, and we're on the same page almost all the time. We do have problems in some of them, or it's not that we discuss it and we take care of it, you know. I don't know if it would make a difference if we have a councilman or not.
Commissioner Martinez.
Mr. Chair, Councilor, I'm listening to you, and I've had the opportunity to be a councilor when there was 8.
Yeah, I know that, sir.
And I had an opportunity to be a mayor when there was 8. So I guess the only thing that I can say from your statement is the current administration, I think if you guys continue to work as you are working now, I think that's probably because of the personalities of the people that encompass the mayor and council today. But if we want to go back to the other way it was before, when you were there as well, on the other administration prior, there's no guarantee to stopping it either. So in other words, the next administration after you all could go back to that again.
Right.
Because there's no teeth to it. And I think at some point you have to figure out, well, how do we make it stronger so that no matter how many numbers are here, they can still move forward? Because really all it takes is a mayor and 2 councilors to run the city today. And it ran it for 2 administrations, I think.
Yeah.
Literally, there was a vote every single item almost in some of these council meetings. I was telling this commission earlier when I was mayor, I only voted 1 time when I had 8 councilors. I would have never voted, but they knew that I had never voted, so they actually made me vote to go into an executive session. So it wasn't because I broke a tie of something that was on the table.
Right.
But I really think that we have to almost guarantee that whatever happened before, we've got to find a solution so it won't happen in the future. So I guess we have to find that happy medium. Do you understand what I'm
Yes.
saying? Because in no way do we want to bring you guys a document that says, we're going to force 6 councilors, 8 councilors, 10 councilors down your throat. That's all there is to it. We're also trying to find the balance because, you know, you stop and think about it. I've been here long enough I was here long enough before to see that I can't believe that one person could be as disruptive as that person was. Literally, you guys were working literally almost behind the scenes trying to figure out how to fix the charter, when at the end of the day, you would have never been able to do it with the way it was before. Those are like wishes, not problems that you could solve. So we've got to figure a way that we put the community back on its feet so that we never return to as simple as two councilors and the mayor running the town, because that's what it boiled down to at some point, I guess. And good, bad, or indifferent, however that happens to be, that doesn't matter. We just have to make sure that it's more open, I guess, and we guarantee that we're not just electing people for personality, although that's part of the job. We're actually looking to elect people to do the best they can for our community. So I know what you mean. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And if I may, in kind of jumping on what he says, what Commissioner Martinez has just said, when we look back at the history, starting back with Mayor Marquez's administration, when they switched over to the 4, there were a lot of votes there that the mayor broke the tie on. We know that when Mayor Ortiz was here, he was almost every vote, every vote. And then with Commissioner Gurley-Giron, it was the same thing. It was almost every vote. So in order to move this, and I don't know if that shows a real dysfunction in the community or not, but the perception of the public is that it wasn't working. And when people come up to me and tell me, you're on the commission, we have to do this, this, and this, a lot of the input that I get is around that number.
Yeah.
So it's not just us that are looking at it, it's not just the other counselors, it's the community as a whole. Because I think that it did tend to disrupt and detract from the workings of the city a lot. And I think that it had a negative impact overall. And starting way back, not just the last administration, not the one before, but way back, all the way to Mayor Marquez, when they first went to 4. That's when you saw the problems start and kind of the division within the council. And I mean, if I'm a smart mayor and I'm gonna come in and I have an agenda, I'm gonna try to do that same split so that I can have the deciding vote, so that I can get what I want. So my agenda goes through at any means, whether it's for the people or not. It's my agenda, and that seems to be the demeanor in a couple of administrations, and even back to Mayor Marquez, when they had their own agenda that may or may not have been a benefit for the community as a whole. And I think we have to look at the community as a whole when we look at this, and that's what we're doing as a charter commission, is looking at how can we best recommend changes to the charter that would best benefit the community at large. Not for one person, not for one councilor, not for one side of the city or another, because we still have that thought here, but what's best for the community.
So what I, since this new administration came in and the way it's been working, the way we've been, whatever the agendas they bring to us, we have worked very closely together, okay? And that's a common kind of a yes or no on between 4 and 8, because of the way we're working. It hasn't been this close, this kind of administration hasn't been like this for a lot of years, like you guys know it. I've seen it all my life.
Yeah.
I've been here all my life. I've seen it. And I've seen a lot of when it's a split vote or something, and the mayor's got whatever he's got the agenda, it goes to the mayor. And this administration hasn't done that. We haven't. Maybe if we've done it once, maybe once. That's the only reason I do think that. And we're only, we got the mayor for 2 more years. I'm here for almost 1 more year. I don't know what's going to happen after that. I know what you guys are looking at, just for in case it does happen, it comes back to 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I don't like it. I tell it right now, I do not like it. I'd rather be with administration the way we're working now, but it could happen. It could go back to what you guys are talking about. So.
And one of the things, I do have to compliment you as a counselor and the other counselors, that you have been working together, and it's pretty obvious. I mean, it seems like things are moving now again. You're not sitting there thinking about going to court to force things. Unfortunately, you know, we had that in one administration where you had to go to, the council went to court. And that's not good for the city as a whole, and it slows everything down. Even the day-to-day work of the city slows down when you have that type of a situation. But I have to salute you and compliment you on the way you have been working together, and it's really good to see. And in looking at making recommendations, we'll look at that too. I think we have to look and see, well, what's working, what's not, and, you know, what's the best for the community. Commissioner Martinez.
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Ulibarri, one other area that we're going to probably look at is placing items on the agenda and possibly putting a process in place.
Okay.
Because it's been an issue even past the last two administrations.
It's happened. It's happened.
And even when I was mayor too, I told the city councilors, if half of the councilors bring something, it'll be on the agenda. Okay. But that was just verbal. It was never put down in writing. It wasn't part of any ethics statement, whatever they had going on. So really, I think we have to do what's best and put together a process of getting the items on the agenda. Because if there's no process for that, and the majority wants X, and you can't get it for formal action, it's pretty much you're not listening to the community. The public's being represented by those, you know, representatives, and they can't place an item on the agenda when they have a majority.
That's true. That's
We
very
need to
true.
come up with a process. I didn't think about that, you know, when we did the charter before, but we went through a lot of other stuff at the same time, because initiative, referendum, and recall, and I can't remember a couple other items, making it a home rule community. All those were more important at the time. But it's obvious that we need to figure a process for getting items on the agenda.
And there's another thing that they brought to my mind is that the runoffs, that say, that's another thing that's costing the city, you know, for runoffs, you know. I think there's something on the charter, I did read a little bit about it, you know, that's hurting the city, and, you know, when you have to do a runoff, I had to do a runoff. And that's, to me, it was a little crazy for me to do that, and just because I didn't have that 50% that I needed, you know, and I think that could change, you know, on that. I don't know if it could be done or what, you know.
Yeah.
That is one of the areas that had been mentioned by the other councilors, and all the other councilors have mentioned that. Commissioner Iron, you had to.
Yes, I wanted to respond actually to Commissioner Martinez and Councilor Ulibarri. The charter itself, 207C, says the governing body shall determine its own rules and order of business and shall cause minutes to be kept of its proceedings. And I don't see an ordinance that has happened. And if it was done in a way that was exhausted and thoroughly defined in terms of how the governing body operates, there would not be any confusion or any uncertainty or unclarity in terms of how you get things on the agenda. How you get things on the agenda, how an ordinance is introduced or amended, those are things that should be reduced to writing, and not necessarily within the charter. That's certainly something within your power as a member of the governing body to define in a way that serves you well.
Sort of like an administrative regulation?
Well, an administrative regulation is often issued by the city manager, if I'm not mistaken, and that's something that is of dubious binding authority. But certainly, you could enact the ordinance that defines how you place something on the agenda, and all the confusion around that would be dispelled.
Well, if I may, within that, we can't do it, the city council certainly could, formulate its rules by ordinance, but wouldn't adding some language under C, because it's very short, the governing body shall determine its own rules and order of business and shall cause minutes to be kept of its proceedings. Well, the minutes are obviously done, but the formulation of rules and order of business has not been defined. And that has not been defined in fact, in administrations. When you come in, do you sit down and make the rules of order? And that should be, again, defined that shall happen. And I think that there is a shall, but how can we assure that it is done by the incoming council? And that's, I think, definition within C, adding that, what the mechanism is to ensure that the rules and order are agreed upon by the incoming council, then that would eliminate a lot of problems. Do we have to go to statute, to ordinance? Perhaps not. Perhaps just adding definition within C itself, because it says shall,
It shall keep minutes,
but is it?
or shall determine its own rules.
Shall determine.
Right, it's not discretionary.
And shall means you have to do it, but how often is it done? Did you do that when you were at council? Did you come up your first meeting and say the rules and the order shall be? See, and you didn't. And so you're in violation of the charter there when you don't, but there's no one to enforce that.
Well, and there we are back at the same issue that we've had with a number of other provisions of the charter, where the charter has tasked the city council with a duty, in this case, to define its own rules of procedure, and yet the city council has not complied with this mandatory requirement of the charter, and there's no mechanism to enforce. There's no way to comply or compel
Well,
compliance.
doesn't the ordinance have to match the charter? Shouldn't it? Shouldn't the ordinance,
No, the charter should, if I may, Commissioner,
Well, which one's
the charter
the same?
should, with the word shall, that means they must come up with rules and order. And an ordinance could be brought forth from the council to enforce it or to define what
Which
the order
one?
shall be. So it comes after, but the word
but they
shall.
shouldn't mirror each other, do they?
Well, it's defined there, shall, but when and
And
what do you
by
do if
whom?
you don't?
Yeah.
It's just like the appointment of committees. We know that shall happen. How many times do you get a committee appointments by the new council? It doesn't
They have to have
happen.
it within 45 days.
Yeah, and they
You can't
don't, they don't.
That doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen. So, there needs to be, again, going back as Commissioner Martinez, Commissioner Einer have already said, we need to put some teeth in this. But how do we do it? Do we do it through the ethics board? Is that the mechanism we do? And make sure that the ethics board is impaneled? Because that's one board that's never been done.
Ever.
That's never been impaneled, and that is in the charter. So that's the body that would oversee what the council does,
Right.
and if we don't impose them, it's always hard to impose a body that's gonna oversee you. I mean, how long did it take in the legislature for them to get an ethics board? It was talked about, I was a lobbyist for 9 years, and it had been talked about 20 years before that, and we didn't do it until the last legislature, so some 50 years probably.
Because no one wants to hurt another person. That's
Well, it's
why.
not hurt themselves. They don't want to hurt themselves, they want no one to look over their
Yeah.
shoulder. And that's what it is, you have a board that's watching what you do to make sure it's in within legal limits. Again, if we'd have had an ethics board in place that would have called out the previous administration, we might not have gone through what we went through. But without a board, there's no one to impose these rules that say shall.
Yeah.
Well, the ethics board says shall, but it's never done. So how do we do that? What mechanism do we use to make sure that the council, in their organizational meeting or shortly thereafter, imposes these rules on themselves? Commissioner Martinez.
I'm sort of following what you're saying and trying to also, read through what we have here already. Rules of and order of business. Maybe we need to put a deadline on it, number one, and that it's not negotiable. In other words, if the mayor doesn't want to put in the agenda, it says it has to happen by 90 days after the organizational meeting, that the rules should be in place.
Well, what happens
Whatever
if
that number is.
what happens if it doesn't happen within 90 days?
What triggers the question?
What is it
Yeah.
trigger? And that's where you have
Then
to
we need the
have,
teeth.
then you need the ethics board with the teeth that says, well, then we can do a fine. What is the maximum fine? $500 or 90 days in jail or something like that?
$500, I believe, that's,
Yeah, it doesn't go jail time.
It just sounds funny.
yeah, and that's.
Doesn't it charge you $500 and 90
It's
days?
never been done, that's why
No,
it's
it's not
comical.
that, that's what she's saying. It's
But I think without that mechanism to enforce the shalls within the charter, this charter has no teeth.
Right.
I think, and when you look back at the original members of the charter, not just this one, 2010, but the original charter had several of those same things, but were never tested.
While they were watching each other on the side of the river, that's what they were doing back then.
Well, back then, yes, because if you do this, I can do this, and so it was 4 and 4 from each side of the river, and it was a newly consolidated community, and they were watching each other.
That's all they were doing. It was 4 and 4.
So it was a self-imposed kind of, self-imposed, I guess, what can I say? I don't even know what to call it. They were watching. But now we don't have that. We've been consolidated for 50 years. And nobody's watching over anybody's shoulder because we're all, the people in the west have moved to east and people east have moved to west.
And the rest went to Rio Rancho.
And the rest
No,
went to
yeah,
Rancho.
the rest of the cities in
Yeah,
Rio.
that's how.
Maybe we should get some outside observers from Rio Rancho to come and tell us to watch.
Why would you leave town?
But that all kidding aside, I think that's the question. How do we impose, or how do we empower the ethics board to enforce these rules? And what's the rule book that they should follow, and what are they should have almost a tickler calendar. I'd say within 45 days this has to happen, within 90 days this has to happen, and if it's not done, these are the penalties.
But if I may, this is the catch. The ethics board is assembled to enforce the code of ethics, which the city council is tasked with enacting as an ordinance with penalties attached, which they've never done. So the problem is partially that it's been rare we've even had an ethics board duly constituted, but the other part is, if we do, and when we do, they have nothing to enforce because it's never been enacted. And so we have one of these who will dull the cat scenarios until the city council actually votes and approves an ethics code that would empower the ethics board to police their ethics. What have we got?
That's true, that's true.
Couldn't we, if I may, by changing the charter and adding dates here in the shall, that would automatically kind of formulate a calendar of events. And the ethics, short of having the council adopting a code of ethics, couldn't we do it by violations of state law?
I don't know if you could do that.
If you look at,
Well, it's by home rule, we could do anything we want to.
well, that's not actually,
Well, but then, as long as it's not contrary and it's more stringent then we can.
we can exercise rights that the state has not denied us. That is the nut of home rule right there.
And so it's a simple process of elimination, trying to see what the state has denied. And what have they denied?
Well, now there's an ethics committee. at the legislature, Mr. Chair.
At the legislature.
There wasn't before.
Right.
Right. But I think if you look at the state ethics code, you'll be staring at that thing long and hard trying to find teeth.
Well, of course, they don't want.
There's one or two of them, maybe three. I think our former mayor got bit by one of those teeth. But it's not necessarily as stringent as we may wish to have at the city level. That would be my caveat.
And then the stringency rule, as long as it's more stringent than, then the more stringent law applies. Because we're going to take the same laws and apply it in a different fashion, the environmental regs at the federal level. If your local or state regulations are more stringent than, then that does, most stringent applies. And that's been held up in the Supreme Court. So if we can do that and say our rules are more stringent than, then the state they could go argue it in court, but they're going to have to go to the high court. Here's the thing. I think that there is teeth in this in some, well, there's rules in this that haven't been followed. There's not any teeth to enforce those rules.
Mr. Chair, I was
Mr.
thinking,
Martinez.
and I know that the state just did their ethics deal not too long ago, and it's met, I think, a couple or three times for different items, I think, with legislators. Like the city of Albuquerque, they've had an ethics commission for a long time, and mostly because of the way their elections run. You have to collect the $5, and that's how you qualify for public financing for elections in the city of Albuquerque. But every so often, I hear that they meet and they find that that candidate, did violate the ethics rules, whatever, they did it the incorrect way. So I would imagine that the city of Albuquerque may have some wording or maybe some teeth in the way they do their ethics committee. Because they've been operating for a number of years. It's not a new thing, it's been around longer than the legislative ethics committee.
Yes, that's good.
So we may want to take a look at that.
Question, have you, I know that you guys are, just put this charter committee together. It's a lot of work, I tell you that much. Have you taken a look at any other charter municipalities from other municipalities' charters? Is there a
Looked at
big
most.
difference in some of the stuff that we have on our municipality to the others? Is there a lot of difference on the?
This charter, from my review, there's 22 other communities that have it, 19 of which are significant charters. There's 3 of them that are kind of, I question if they're even charters, from real small communities. It's just a way to get together, really. But and I did a real summary review. I didn't do a real exhaustive review of them.
Yes.
But it seems as if the charter of the city of Las Vegas is a pretty strong charter, comparatively speaking. You can look at the charter of the city of Albuquerque, and it's volumes long because they've developed it over a long time, and they've made revisions to it, and they have the ethics commission, they have the police review boards, they have all these other things they've gone in there with. So it's more, in order to do that, and they're a much larger community, it may not fit exactly. But I think if we looked at that, that's a good idea, is to look more in depth at those other charters and have them review. But what I suggest, because we have such a short period of time to review here, is to perhaps, I'm going to meet, just as a point of information, I'm going to meet with the city attorney right after to go over and how do we bring in our own independent counsel. Perhaps we could ask the council to do a review of those charters, see where ours fits, and to look at those communities that have impaneled an ethics or something similar to that, and what the penalties and what are the teeth in that particular charter. And perhaps that's a good place to start. Because I think on the other things, we have a general idea. For example, we discussed the number of counselors. We've discussed a recall. We're discussing the power of the mayor, which I think there's a couple questions for council in there also. But I think for the most part, in what we're looking at in the brief time that we have, we're not gonna do a lot. So I would suggest, let's take on those major things that are glaring right now and deal with them. And then hope that in 5 years, the next bunch that comes up will take on the rest. Because unfortunately, we have a timeline. And so we're doing a lot in a short period of time.
I know.
So I think that's the best way to do it, is let's see what we can do to strengthen up those areas that, and I think that the most glaring are those that I've mentioned, the number, the recall, powers of the mayor, and the ethics. And that's just my thought. I mean, it's up to the commission and up to what you want to do. I'm thinking that's a lot to chew on.
I'd like to pose a question to the councilman, if I might.
Sure, go ahead, Commissioner.
An open-ended question. We've kind of, in some respects, been going on the idea that there has to be some sort of mechanism of coercion, but we don't actually understand what's going on with respect to charter compliance. And what we do know is that over the slightly more than a decade since the charter has been signed, there's been certain duties with respect to ordinance that have not been followed. For example, we're just now formulating the ordinance that defines the powers and duties of the Police Advisory Commission, which is fantastic, but it's a decade overdue. And my question to you is, what do you see as being the hitch in the giddy-up? What has prevented the city council from acting on these affirmative duties that are in the charter?
I really do not have an answer for that, really. I think how we were elected in, and they give us a charter, and we looked at the charter, but we didn't look at everything that the charter had in it, and to implement that, that we were following the rules or breaking the rules of the charter, we did. We did do that also. But to tell you the truth, I'm not sure.
Mr. Chair, and if I could jump
Commissioner
in
Martinez.
for the counselor, and you know this too, Lee, and all of us know that, with the constant change of attorneys and managers and mayor, nobody has really just taken the time out and said, hey, what are we supposed to do here? And I think sometimes the counselors were fighting for their own life, their own existence for some of these meetings. And I'm saying, how do they do it? You know what I mean? Because there's no way to actually say, what am I supposed to do here when I get in here? We have the opportunity of putting this charter recommendations together for the community and the council and the mayor, and letting them know, these are what we point out that need to be worked on now. And then some of these we're going to put deadlines. Like in my mind, when the organizational meeting takes place, that for sure is when the ethics board needs to be appointed. Okay, and then let's just say that we're going to be doing this new rules and order of business committee, to go back and see what the council needs to do. I wouldn't want that to be done quickly in the organizational meeting, but so many days after the organizational meeting, it shall be done, okay? And maybe recommend that we take care of all these items that have come up. But I've seen the council over the last number of administrations, some of them have been literally fighting for their life. So in other words, they can't take care of the actual business at hand because they don't know what's going to happen at the very next council meeting. It was that volatile, I guess I should say, from one meeting to the next. And you could see it from the outside that how are they getting anything done? Well, they were getting the essentials done, but they weren't getting the things like these things done because there was just so much change. And then you come in, everything may be the same at this meeting, there's a new attorney.
It's very.
So that's what I think has been the reason why the last two administrations have been hard to get things done.
It's been very hard,
That's what I
For
see.
me being in the city that they elect me for, it's been very hard because in my knowledge or in my mind, I didn't know, when I came in, I didn't know it was gonna be that kind of trauma or whatever you wanna call it, but It's, you know, I learned a lot. I can tell you guys I did learn a lot, and it's a lot more comfortable. You know, I'm more at ease. You know, we're getting things done, you know, and hopefully we can stay like this, you know, and hopefully the other mayors or what, down the line, it stays like this. I don't know what's gonna happen, but, you know, it makes a big difference. It's a lot mentally at ease, at least better, you know. But it's been really rough for the past, in my knowledge, in my opinion, you know, because I've been here through everything, so.
No, I can tell.
Counselor, I think we're coming to time here, but we appreciate you coming today. We will look, I'll ask Darlene to look and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, sure.
If there were notes that the former attorney left that we can look at. I think you've given us some insights here to look at from your perspective. And we'll be before council, we have to meet with the mayor and then have a couple meetings, but I'm thinking that we're going to be before council probably in August sometime, mid to late August, and come up with some things that we've come up with, if all goes well. Keep your fingers crossed. And so we'll come before you with some recommendations. I hope that you will consider taking before the voters.
I just want to thank you guys for the work you guys do for us. You know, it's nice to have a charter committee. Hopefully you guys can put your minds together and change this a little bit, or whatever you need to change. And, you know, I'll look at it and go from there, you know. So I just want to thank you, all you guys, for doing your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for what you've done, and thank you for hanging in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys. And good job.
Nobody ever comes into a political position knowing everything.
Yeah,
You come in wanting to do your best.
You know what it is?
Sometimes,
It's very, you know, I've been here all my life since I was a kid. I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot, and a lot of good and bad things. And when I got into this, what I'm doing now, I started realizing everything. Went back to all these years. You know, I love this little town. I just love it so much that, you know, and I hate when the administration, I'm not talking about maybe 3-4 administrations back, what's happening, but I used to keep away from it now because I didn't, and now that I'm doing what I do for the city, and it's tough, it's really tough, you know, but you know, we do our best and go from there.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you. You guys have a good afternoon.
you do.
With that, our next contestant, no. The city clerk, Cassandra Fresquez. Cassandra, I want to thank you before we start for, you did send us what you had suggested for consideration. I hope we've all reviewed them, and they were very concise. But we'd like, along the same lines, including these, and aside from these, we'd like to get your perspective on what you would, or what you've seen that has hindered the city from moving forward with respect to the city charter.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate that you value my opinion and my suggestions. So we'll go ahead and get started. I kind of heard a little bit about what was said at your last meeting with the councilors. So I heard some of that, and then I heard Councilor Olivares. So do you want me to just go with my recommendations one by one? And then we'll have
However you
discussion?
want to proceed is
Okay.
fine. Just go ahead
Okay,
and we'll listen.
sure.
And we'll interrupt with questions if we have them, and we'll go from there.
So of course, all of you know I've been the city clerk since this charter was adopted back in 2012. So I came on in 2009, and at that time, the Charter Commission was preparing the Home Rule Charter, so that's when I came in. So my first election was to place this charter on the ballot. So I've been here since, so I can can kind of tell you what's been happening with this particular charter and what I think some of the changes or amendments might be, or you might want to consider.
Excellent.
So, one of the things is, and you brought this up with Councilor Divari, is that in this entire charter, there's several places where it calls for ordinances. And it does state that there shall be ordinances adopted. There has never been ordinances adopted in many of these areas. And I can tell you that, especially in the area that I deal with a lot, which is the election. There was supposed to be ordinances for campaign practices, for the procedures for election. That never happened, and I think that should have been done. I think they had a deadline of September of 2011. That never happened. So what I had to do is I had to work off of the charter as well as state statute. So I worked with both of those documents back and forth to make sure that we were meeting all of those ordinances. So that's what I had to do, and I'm sure that's what's been done with other specific places in the entire charter. So I'm not sure why the governing body has not adopted, but I think, in my
Before you
opinion,
go on, so you've had to, so in lieu of having any ordinance passed, you've gone to state charters at default. I mean, state statutes at
state
default.
statute, that's correct,
Okay,
just to make sure that we're following an
yes.
ordinance,
So that's been
the
the
practice.
de facto charter in some areas.
And, Chairman, have
Commissioner
the councilor and mayor known that they needed to do this, or was it kind of ignored?
Well, I go to the city manager,
Okay.
because I report to the city manager. The city manager handles the day-to-day operation. So the city manager at the time did know that this was in place, because this was new, it was a new document. So it was just never done in time, and then they just never addressed it again. So I continued to work off of the state statute. And I don't know if I'm sure you've read through that election section in detail, and you see some of that where it says we can't have, I believe it says something that we can't have the same workers for the election, for the runoff and for the regular, and certain things like that that we had to look at. So going back to, I believe it is, if you have a strong city manager, that city manager is going to communicate with the mayor and the councilors, and to bring these ordinances, or to give directive that to tell the mayor and council, we need these in place. So can you give either myself or directive, or the city attorney, or we can all work together. I'm willing to work with the city attorney and the city manager to put those together.
Commissioner Steiner?
I note in the charter's job description of the city attorney, there's two words that were really big in my career that I just don't see there, and those two words are regulatory compliance. Do you think it might help to explicitly task the city attorney with bringing these kind of issues to the attention of the governing body to be addressed?
I do. So I think if those two positions are key, and so they guide the mayor and council through all of this. Because sometimes, like you said, the mayor and council comes in, they don't know. So we have to tell them, these are the things that are coming up that you have to take care of by a certain date. And I prepare the agenda along with the city manager. So if we know these things are coming up, it's our job to tell the mayor and council, Now, I don't know if that's been done, and the mayor and council, or mayor has said, no, I don't know what was done in the past, but I'm just saying that's where it lies. I believe the city manager has to work closely in communicating with mayor and council and letting them know these are the things that we haven't done and we need to address.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Martinez?
Cassandra, I'm trying to follow sort of what Commissioner Einer just talked about, in my mind, in regards to the issues relative to the election, okay? I see that as something that's under your purview. You're the city clerk, okay? So I would imagine that for an ordinance to properly go through its process, in my mind, it starts at committee level, it goes to the department director, and in this case, it would be you. So then you would have this electioneering ordinance, whatever, we don't have that you follow state law to do today. You would ask for the city manager to direct the city attorney to help put the document together, right?
Yes.
That's how I envision this to happen. I think we can tell the city attorney that there's a bunch of these procedures that need to be taken care of. Maybe after we have this first opportunity, when the community votes for the new charter, if we're that lucky, that we have a list to give the clerk to work with the attorney to get all of these items taken care of. Almost like we need to have an ethics board. Number two, we need to have rules, what do they call it?
Rules and
Rules and order of business for the city council. Those things are like musts that have to be taken care of so that we can run the community, the city government efficiently. So I would imagine that no matter what we come up with, when it's coming to stuff relative to the election and things that your office takes care of, you're the point, right?
Yes.
That would work with the
City attorney.
and then get the document back to the city manager for
Right.
review, and then to mayor and council
Yes.
for vote.
Yes,
So that's the process, right?
that's the process.
Okay. So that's what I'm thinking, Lee. I'm not too sure if I've circumvented, the attorney taking on this task when it's really the department director that needs that piece done.
It's really, there's responsibility between, I would say, three entities, okay? The city attorney is the chief legal counsel and is supposed to be giving responsible legal advice to the governing body. And I would think that implicit in that is saying you're not complying with your own charter and this actually weakens your own authority and your own ability to conduct business. Second, obviously, is the city clerk's office with respect to elections. You're tasked with running that show, and you're tasked with running it in compliance with state law, the charter, municipal regulations. But the third is actually the ethics board, that the full name is Ethics, Conflict of Interest in Elections. Pretty sure. And 903E tasks the governing body, as our city clerk was telling us, with adopting the ordinance that provides for implementation of the city charter's section on political activity. And this also hasn't been done. So this also is an area where we have potentially an ethics board, but that which the ethics board is tasked with being the watchdog on, they can't be the watchdog because there is actually no ordinance in place for them to enforce.
Mr. Chair.
Before that, with respect to what both of you just said, both the commissioners just brought forth, it occurs to me that under section 505, and when it's listing the duties of the city clerk, could we not define as one of those actions as enforcing those provisions that shall be enacted, so that she would act as a calendar within her duties as clerk to enforce the calendar? That seems like the office where that would come from would be the clerk's office, with the enforcement of the calendar and those shall provisions. And it seems to me that within the charter, if we could add dates, uncertain dates for action, that calendar would be enforced by or brought to light, and not necessarily enforcement. Enforcement would be then through the ethics board or some other mechanism or legal mechanisms, but that the clerk should impose a calendar. Because that's generally what the duties of a clerk are in other in other areas of government. If you look at the clerk of the Supreme Court sets the calendar, brings the calendar forth and then enforces the calendar. And the clerk of the House and Senate do the calendars. So along those lines, the clerk of the legislature assures that the legislature convenes at a certain time and then recesses at a certain time, ends. It's the clerk that has those duties to enforce the calendar. It would seem to me that the city clerk in this case would be the one to have the duties of at least imposing the calendar. So that might be a place, the proper office for that imposition. It shouldn't be legal. Because legal should enforce the calendar that she brings forth. Because that's the legal part. If it's shall, and it's not enforced, then that becomes a legal problem. But the shall is not, the shall, and making sure the enforcement in the calendar
Mr.
is
Chair?
not the attorney.
Are you referring to just election, or are you
No.
referring to all ordinances and
To any
specific
provision,
dates?
to any provision within the charter that has a shall on it. So the imposition of rules and orders shall, the city council shall impose rules and orders. If we, that's C, rules and minutes. So the minutes are obviously under you're the clerk, that's under your office.
I know when they have to be done.
But
I
the
do
shall on the order, it's just like the minutes. You know that you have a date
A
for them to...
deadline, right.
A deadline. Well, if we have a shall provision in the charter, that imposes a deadline that's not defined. Maybe definition of that deadline, and it's just like your minutes, you shall, the clerk shall say, you shall impose this.
Okay, so how am I going to enforce or make sure that that city manager, city attorney brings that forth?
Do you personally have the authority to do that kind of arm twisting?
Is that teeth?
We don't have teeth in this to give you authority to do it.
Well, give me the teeth.
She serves at the pleasure of the governing body. So see,
That's true.
Well,
yeah.
Well,
She
serving
serves
at
It's
serving
going
at
to
the
be hard for
pleasure,
her to do that.
It has
serving
been
at the
hard.
pleasure and enforcing the rules of the body are two different
Different.
mechanisms. So she serves at their pleasure, but they're impaneled to and shall do this that they haven't been doing.
Yeah.
It's like the checks and balances, it goes back to that turn.
Exactly, Commissioner Madrid. So I think that within that office, if we can define the roles here in those areas of shall, and define it that it shall be the duty of the clerk to impose a calendar. When these rules shall be imposed. So we define within the rules of the governing body in 2.6C, and 2.7C, the governing body shall determine in its own rules and order of business, shall determine. It doesn't say when, it says shall, you shall, and tell you when.
Right.
Well, what if we defined when?
Yes.
Shall within a period of time. That way gives the clerk, and within her duties, we'll say it shall impose those rules or provisions of the charter that have a deadline or have a set time limit
Yeah,
to be imposed. Commissioner Ryan?
thank you. As a practical matter, I'm not adverse, but I would be adverse to setting up the city clerk for a fist fight with the mayor and others. We've seen as a practical matter, when the city clerk, if I can be blunt, was keeping a very low profile and very non-controversial, the kind of duress that could be applied to her position. And so if you're going to give the city clerk, if you're going to task the city clerk With that duty, I think we also need to think about how to protect that position from arm twisting. We should be thinking about that anyway, because, as Joseph Stalin said, he who votes decides nothing. He who counts the votes decides everything. And for the city clerk to be in a position where their arm can be twisted, where they can be placed on, how many months of it was it? Administrative leave?
11.
11? And the ordinance actually says several days?
It was several days.
It was several days. Yes, exactly.
We had umbrella drinks at the beach.
I think it might have been a more troubling time than that, but.
Well, yes, it was. I jest.
Well, we do need to think of how to the maximum, depoliticize the city clerk's position. I would say also to depoliticize the city attorney's position, because we've seen that is the siege perilous. The city attorney in the city of Las Vegas is basically a mayfly. 2 weeks and they're gone.
That, if I may, that hasn't been troubling in my view of the city, that the attorney seems to at times have short tenure for various reasons, whether it be personal or conflicts with both either the city, the mayor, or the city manager. I've seen it both. But I think that, and maybe the bigger question here is when we look at those positions, and we look at, in considering, for example, the mayor's ability to appoint, if we're to define that in a different way, that he should have some type of a personnel structure when filling that position instead of an appointment. Do we do that? And the question is, do we do that for the other positions? I mean, which one of these are non-sacrificial lambs? And do we do that? And what's the best mechanism for doing that? I mean, do we go through a personnel process and we take applications and the best person is brought forth, the most qualified?
I have a recommendation on that on my list.
Okay, and I'll go, give me 1 second. Or do we make them elected positions like in other communities, in other states? Those positions are elected. I mean, so how do you do that? And I'm posing that as a question. And maybe the city clerk has a recommendation, as she said. Tell us about how you would do that.
If I can.
Commissioner Martinez.
Let me ask real quick. I went quickly and I saw what the City of Albuquerque Board of Ethics does. The way that thing's developed, it's under the clerk's office. And it's all 3 appointed positions by the mayor and 3 appointed positions by the council. And those 6 appoint the 7th person. So that way it's completely sort of a second blind, what is a double blind test?
Double blind test.
So that's how I see that as part of it. But as far as I know, these members have been on this board, a lot of them have been there for a long time. So in other words, it doesn't matter who the mayors are, they're just keeping the same people because they see some continuity. I think that's been helpful, I guess, to some point. So when we're talking ethics and we're talking this calendar that you're talking about, in my mind, it belongs under your department. So that's just food for thought. That's just stuff that I just saw real quick, and that's how they take care of it. Now, Lee brings up an interesting item is how do we protect the clerk from, a fist fight with the city manager, a fist fight with the mayor and council? We really have to put the teeth in place so that clerk is protected, because she's the one that, or he's the one that are going to be in the line of fire. One way or another, that person needs to be protected. And I'll tell you what, knowing this clerk, she's going to do what's right first, even if it means I'm gone, okay? Because I think she knows that she'll have a leg to stand on. That's what I see, number one. Number two, going back to the attorney, and I guess this is the part that I guess I live the real world. When I was here, I'll tell you what, this city moves fast, okay? Things move quick. I can guarantee you that when the day the city attorney came in, they gave him a book of a bunch of stuff that needs to be done yesterday. And he only has so much time to get them all done, and he will not have time to review a charter or review any other ordinance unless that's part of the docket for the next council meeting. This thing moves fast. So there has to be someone like a clerk that says, by the way, these 5 items you need to take care of now. These ones have to be taken care of in 30 days, this one in 60 days, irrelevant of anything else going on. Why? Because the charter says that. And these are the things that have to be taken care of. You put that on the back of an attorney who's getting given a book, and here's ordinances and you know, planning and zoning items and all kinds of stuff. Those guys don't have, I know you guys, you need more help, right? I can tell you right now, right? You never have enough people at the city attorney's office. Why? It's moving too fast. All the departments are sending stuff. Everybody wants to review stuff. Everything moves too fast. So the real world is, there has to be somebody keeping roll. And I say it's the clerk, but that position needs to be protected.
With respect to that, and excuse me, does it have a board term for the ethics committee?
I don't see it, but I think you have to dig deeper into it. They have the next meeting in July.
And the thing about the ethics board, these boards, it would, I think the timing of them is essential also, is that if you're going to do a board of ethics or a board that's overseers, if you would, is to have them staggered between terms, between elections, so that you have some continuity, and then their term comes up at the middle of a term, so that they're in staggered terms with the council or whatever. And if we went to 8 councilors, for example, those would be staggered, so how do you stagger them? You know, so it's a little complex problem, but just food for thought.
Mr. Chair, if I may go I have this kind of set out page number
Yes,
by
please.
page number, if I can
Go ahead.
do that.
We want to beat the dead horse to death.
We want to make sure it's that.
Looking at, if you turn to page 7 of the charter, 2.05, the vacancy in office, number C, it states there that the mayor, with approval of the council, shall within 15 days of the vacancy appoint a qualified elector. So, and then further down, it states that within the 45 days of the vacancy. So I saw this happen this last time. I don't believe that 15 days should be included in there, because I think, and I'm not sure, maybe you can answer, Commissioner Martinez, why that 15 days was placed in there. And I think it was so that the mayor would bring a name within the 15-day period, but, you know, to start the process. But then it says 45 days, so I think you should remove the 15 days and just keep it within the 45 days.
Commissioner
That's my
Martinez.
recommendation.
Mr. Chair, Cassandra, I'll blame the attorney. Because I don't remember why there's 2 dates on that one.
Yeah.
That makes no sense.
No, it doesn't.
Well, there's 2 different processes. 15 days is for the mayor to appoint, right, with the approval of the council. If that doesn't happen, then things get expensive because we default after 45 days to have a special election to fill the position.
Right, so if it isn't filled within the 45 days, but why does it say 15 days? It should just say within the 45 days, and then it would go to a special election.
Okay.
So,
Just remove the
so remove the 15 days.
Well, it's 15 days, if I would, 15 days for the vacancy to appoint a qualified elector. And then, so because of the mayor bringing forth the name and the council
Reject.
Might not approve
affirming
it. No.
the affirmation.
Right.
So you have to have, that's what they're doing there, is they're trying to force that in a quick period of time. Now, here's my question, is when does the 45 days start? It says from the date of the vacancy.
From the date of the vacancy.
So that's 15 days within 15 days from the date of the vacancy, you have to appoint,
And then
bring
you have-
forth an appointment, and then you have 30 days after that for the council to take action.
So it almost, we almost didn't make that deadline to actually bring it to the council, because we had to bring it to a council meeting, of course. So it's all in that timing.
Right.
So I would say just within the 45 days, period, not,
And eliminate the 15.
correct.
Mr. Chair. And then I would imagine that the mayor could bring names if the council didn't agree next,
Right,
next
then you
person on the
bring
list.
next, right.
Yeah, and keep going. Once the 45 days gets there, then it starts the clock.
The clock goes.
Yeah.
Well, it gives them, the 45 days gives them time to see if that person is going to be a person that is going to be
Approved.
approved and fitting
Yeah.
and all of that, because they may not even know the person. And you're telling me to sit somebody in 15 days? I know nothing about this person. At least the 45 days gives them that little extra time.
With a feeling of extra.
Yeah,
Right.
of getting to get that feeling of that person.
Just a question. So if we did just a simple 45, let's think worst case scenario. The mayor could sit on it for 41 days or 43 days and bring it, and you have 2 days left to vote on this. You know, it's 45
We
days.
have, if I may say, we have 45 days to replace. We get applicants. We've had to do that before in the school board, is that we have those 45 days. We have to have somebody sitting there within
45
those
days.
45 days. And we took applications, we vetted, we did all of that before we had the person. If we didn't do it within those 45 days, then the governor
Point.
would appoint the person, because we just couldn't come to a consent.
There's your check, so
Yep.
you have somebody that's
Yep.
going to take care of it if you can't do it.
Yep.
So if we added something like that provision in the charter, it's 45 days, in this case, it calls for an election. To force it, if you brought forth a name in 45 days, within 45 days and you didn't do it, could we change this to an appointment by the mayor?
What's the difference? If you give
Well-
the mayor that person in the 15 days,
It's subject to the council's
Council.
approval,
Yes.
so he's saying if the council doesn't approve with the mayor,
Ah,
then
okay.
he
Yeah,
can
yeah,
just
yeah.
appoint him.
okay.
See, that would force the council to move within 45 days and eliminate an election.
Right.
Well, at the same time, if we're talking about removing the powers from the mayor to appoint, this would be
With the powers,
the
yeah.
quid pro quo.
Yes,
I
We're going to
agree, yeah.
remove this, but we're going to
And give you
impose this.
Yes.
Then that takes
That
away.
kind of gives the mayor some redress, because he's not able to appoint. He can bring forth names, and the council would vet and approve a name in 45 days. And if they don't do it, then the mayor appoints.
Oh, isn't that really incentive for the mayor to obstruct and delay to the last possible moment so he could really insert a total lemon?
Well, it's up to, and it's not, we're cutting the mayor out of appointment. Sorry. You're asking, we're doing an application process similar to they do at the
Yeah.
school board. You have 45 days for applicants to bring forth names. They could come out from the dog pound if you want to. I'm gonna appoint, here's my name, I'm Spot, I'm the dog, I want to be the mayor, or I want to be the council, fill Counselor Einer's position because he didn't bake good bread and we decided to get rid of him. And then the council would have 45 days to bring forth a name for appointment. If they don't, then the mayor appoints.
And it would also save money.
You would eliminate the election, you would give back that mayor that opportunity that you're taking away,
Yes.
and it forces the council to take action. And that's a quid pro quo, because you're giving it back, I don't know.
I see the downside.
I don't know.
I think the mayor will have, he can stall the whole time too.
Right. Yeah, that's a
That happens,
process.
it's sad.
Ask yourself, If we look back
I would start on the 44th day, and the 45th, we have a, what do you call it, a council meeting, and boom, this is the name, you guys like it or not, or it's go to election, you guys are gonna pay
But the mayor-
$16,000 or go with who I
But would
am.
not the mayor be cut out of it because the council is taking names, not the mayor?
But the mayor's gotta make the appointment with council.
No, you're not, you're taking that away completely. It's the council would vet, take applicants and vet, just like the school board does. And if they don't do it within 45 days, if they can't come up into agreement, then the mayor appoints on the 45th day, or the 46th day.
If the council had a president.
Then he'll get the one that they
of the mayor,
rejected.
Just not the way it's, not the way it's, in my mind, it doesn't work that way, but I'm so happy.
But you know, transparency, the mayor would look very, very bad doing something like that, very bad. And hopefully the radio and the paper would
But
make
see, what
that.
if you have four counselors again, okay? And he lost one of the good ones. He waits, gets his in, and boom, we're back to 3-2. See, so that's where I think the power of the numbers goes back to helping us again.
That's the power of 8. then.
Yeah, so I
In
don't,
that case, because you have, how many school board members are there?
Like,
Well, it's still uneven, the chances of ties are almost nil. So
and
if that works in that
actually,
case.
the president doesn't vote unless there's a tie. And honestly, we almost never have ties.
If the punchline is the mayor gets to appoint without approval of council, be ready for everything leading up to that to be manipulated. I just,
Just know it.
With an
Just looking at prior
With
experience.
an 8-member council, I mean, I could see a 4-4 split, possibly, but what are the chances, what's the probability of that?
it's less than you think.
Well, I know, yeah.
It's really less than the 4 counselors.
Well, the 4 of us are gonna get together and we're gonna sit back.
Yeah.
Uh,
We don't
We're in
want
a
to get more
catch-22
headache to the
situation right
clerk's
there.
office. We need to streamline it and make it.
Well, I like that, that gives us food for thought, I kinda like
Very
that.
good.
Your next one.
My next one, page 8, section 2.07 on the organizational meeting. So what it states on here is that we have an organizational meeting, the first meeting after an election. That has never happened. It's just, it's too soon. One, we have the runoff, so we end up waiting, you know, at least 45, 50 days after, before we even have that meeting.
So it's 2 months.
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to look at removing the runoff or not, or the council is, but I would think they would need a little bit more time to gather, to meet and, you know, be able to think about what they're going to do for this organizational meeting. Because it's been my past experience that they just kind of throw it, like, kind of together and it's not well thought out.
Especially if we have provisions such as shall, and they never get to it, this might be the reason, one of the reasons why. But let me ask you, since you were the clerk, sort of, at the last, when we had the last runoff. Okay, so they have the organizational meeting, and we still have a candidate in runoff that's not part of that, and you appoint committees and everything else at the organizational committee,
It
that
doesn't work.
person is out.
Right.
Has
That
no
person
input.
yeah, has no input, and maybe not any committee appointments.
Right.
So that doesn't work, and that's another reason for we have to question the runoff, and that's been brought before us also, is looking at that.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner.
even with that, the amount of people that vote, I think a runoff costs more than the amount of voters, because you're not going to get the same amount of voters that you had in the first one, because they're going to turn around and say, forget it, I'm not voting a second time. This is ridiculous.
Well,
Right?
to add to that, I could see where a runoff, when you have a large municipality such as Albuquerque, where you have a large number of voters, and you might have a number of candidates. And we've had, one
What's that?
runoff here that, we've had 2 runoffs. One that wasn't changed by the election, the other, that was changed by the runoff, by City Councilor Romero. So what are the chances of that? I mean, that was a really odd election. It was at low numbers, and then in the runoff, they had even lower numbers.
Since 2012, if I may, we've had a runoff every election, and only one time it made a difference.
Mr. Chair,
Romero.
Commissioner,
we're back on organizational meetings and the time frame for that, and I have a related question. Now, it's a requirement that there be an organizational meeting, but the charter defines a number of things that are to be addressed during
Right.
such a meeting, and does that ever happen according to the
As
the
I
black letter of the
mentioned,
charter?
it's kind of thrown together real quickly because it's not enough time to look at all of these different items and put it together. So the organizational meetings already mentioned in state statute. I mean, it's already in there, you have to have one.
Mhm.
But in state statute, it doesn't state a certain time. So they can have it any time after their election, once they're ready to gather, call it a retreat, whatever you want to call it, where they all gather and go over the goals and objectives, for the next year, whatever it is. But, so, the charter doesn't have to have it in there, period, if you don't want it, because it's already in state statute. The reason it's in here is they do have specific things listed within a certain amount of time that you have to have it, so.
But
just
if it
food for
hasn't
thought.
been followed.
And we've
I just
never
think
actually
it-
complied
No.
then
Right.
fully
No.
with, okay.
when you look at the organization, when you look at this specific section and subsection A, the governing body at the first meeting following the municipal election shall convene for the purpose of organizing. So they have to elect people, organizing committees,
Appointed
organizing
officers like us.
officers, all that. Reviewing the mission and vision statement. Sure. That's a question.
That answers
Reviewing the top 10 priorities of the previously elected governing body. Okay. I mean, they may be relevant, they may not be. And confirming the appointment of the city manager and the appointing officer. That's a long meeting. That's a lot to take on in one meeting, and it's, how many times has it happened since you've been here?
And it's the meeting right after election. It's hard to.
So how many times have they done that? And kind of confirm and basically met the provisions of this section?
They don't do it the first meeting after the election.
Never has happened?
So it may have happened a few times, but not.
But did they meet the letter
Not all of that.
as prescribed?
No.
That's almost impossible. I mean, just the top priorities of the previous administration.
It's a lot.
Mr.
Commissioner
Chair,
Martinez.
I have to tell you that we used to have our organizational meeting and we did all those things, okay? But this isn't the list, okay? We had the old charter, okay? So we appointed the mayor pro tem. That was probably one of the biggest things we needed to do, because don't forget, if something happens to the mayor, somebody's got to take over.
Right.
We started working on committees. We did all the appointments of the manager, chief, clerk, attorney. I guess those are the top positions we had to appoint. And then we did as many members of committees as possible. So we did this, and even back as far as Weddle being mayor back in the 80s, we were able to do this, but that was a different charter. That's a lot of work, and I think 45 days is crazy. Would 90 days be a better thing?
I would think so.
Okay, so let me ask another question that's relative to this. Right now, we are going to have an election next March, okay? Are we going to join the world and start having elections in November?
We missed
No.
that deadline, I
We
think.
missed it because.
But can we get in line for the next time?
Yeah,
or
we
is that-
can
is
do
what they
that at
want?
any time,
Are they
any
planning to?
election. You can
Would they
opt
like
in
to?
or opt out,
Yeah.
either way.
So,
Well, it would save the city a lot of money.
Yes,
When you
cost
go in with
effective.
it, yes.
well, it'd be an election, a general election that took care of city, county,
Everything.
state, everything.
Right.
all that.
Also, remember that when they do that, it adds those months, like when when they changed it on us, it added 10 months to our position.
Yeah, Marvin wasn't happy.
Yeah.
He got extra.
You can
Yeah.
either,
We
they
have
have
that.
the choice to increase or decrease their term. So that's
I
up
don't
to the
think any
council.
of them would want to decrease.
Yeah, but I mean, they have that option.
Especially
Yeah.
the money's good, you know what I mean? Money's
Yeah.
good. So,
For all
do
the
you,
headaches.
do you think, so 22 for sure is March?
10 grand.
Yes. Okay.
So the next time that we could be in November would be 24?
Correct.
Okay.
So that, and the council, remember at the first meeting that we attended, Greg and I came, that they at that time elected not to meet the deadline. They'd worry about it next time. The last meeting that Greg and I were here, the mayor said, oh, we've got to meet that deadline, but it had already been, they'd already agreed not to. So, and I think we missed the deadline anyway, so it's 24, so it'll happen in 24. And I kind of agree, but I have mixed thoughts on that. You're gonna have a very long ballot.
It'll be longer.
It'll be longer, and then let's add constitutional amendments and bonds and everything else, so you're gonna have a 40-page ballot.
You'll have to vote once every year, every other year?
It's less confusing for the voter.
So they want you
We
to-
have a lot of confusion.
I don't have as many pair of glasses as it's gonna take me for me to read the fine print.
Nobody does
But
that.
you have,
It's over.
and correct me if I'm wrong, you have the opportunity that if you're going to go for SB 9 or bonds, that they don't have, you can do those optional, because we did that. We did our SB 9 and our bond elections separate from this coming election that's coming now in November, so that we are able to capture the people when it came to our bond and SB 9.
What's this?
Well, that's your mill levy too,
Oh,
okay? Your mill levies and all that. That we have them off of that so that we can make sure that they're not confused in with all the other elections here. Your commissioners, your co-ops, all of those, school boards, all of those are in
I'm back. Thank you.
this November election. But people are getting used to it and they like it. People really pay attention and they like it because it's one election day. Not every time we turn around, we're having an election. And we hear that, I hear that from constituents all the time, is they like it. Plus your bond and your mill levies are by mail. They are not in election day. They're by mail.
the district chose that on their own?
No, it's
That's state
no
law?
law.
Well, with that in mind, and I kind of, again, I have mixed thoughts just because of, but I do think that from what I've heard from people and that I've spoken to about elections is exactly that. Election after election after election. A couple years ago, there's how many elections?
Yeah.
And then we have less and less turnout, less and less voter participation, and more dissension because when did they pass that? Well, when did I miss that election? Well, it was one of those you missed. So I think that by combining them, that's a good thing. I just have my concerns over the length of the ballot, but as we go toward more mail-in ballots, you can take your time at your kitchen table and do that, and that eliminates that thought. But as far as cost goes, especially if you have a runoff and you have an election that are not, and there's city elections, after a while, that's a cost. Though the cost of those extra elections and the runoff and the extra city election could have paid for extra city councilors, because our city councilor just before us had a concern about paying for extra councilors, which isn't a lot of money, but.
Runs about
Wouldn't also-
between 30 to 32,000 for both.
Wouldn't also more people voting, there would be less likely to have a runoff,
Yes.
right?
Probably.
Because you'd have more than 50% of voters.
When you have, you're more apt to have a runoff when you have multiple candidates and low voter turnout.
Right.
Right.
So if you have fewer candidates and a larger turnout, your prospects of having a runoff are lessened. But it depends on what it's stated within the charter. It's 50 plus 1, 50% plus 1. That's a pretty low threshold. I mean, another way of approaching that would be to increase that so that you have, if you have, or decrease it, 45% plus 1 or something like that. Then you could have a clear winner. But in a town such as ours, in a city such as ours, with very low ward populations, is a runoff necessary? I don't think so. I don't think you're gonna have, unless the odd ones that you have a runoff, a simple majority. I mean, and most of the people that I've spoke to on this are in favor of get rid of that runoff. I think it's ridiculous for a city of our size. And the last runoff, it did not significantly change anything. There was almost no difference in the vote. So why have, even though you had less number of candidates, you had no difference in the vote, why?
Doesn't the Secretary of State have some sort of threshold where if the vote for candidates are neck and neck, that they have to recount those?
There's an automatic recount triggered, and then if they're, in the case of a tie, you do it the old-fashioned way. Gave them a chance, you know, the cards, dice, a poker game.
Rooster fight.
I'm in favor of going back to a duel. To eliminate.
Let the strong will survive.
Told you I'd win.
Mr. Chair,
It kills you.
Commissioner Ryan.
I'm concerned that we may have wandered somewhat afield of the city clerk's concerns.
We're going to, yeah, the duel is my fault, sorry.
But it makes sense. In some regards.
If I may, I'll move on to the next one.
Yes, please.
So if you'll just consider the time frame on that organizational meeting, I think they need more
I think
time.
that's a fair concern, thank you.
And you said 90 days would feel good.
I think so.
Okay.
The next one I had is the governing body's rules of procedure. So I know it's been discussed several times with others and amongst yourselves. So we had a governing body's rules of procedures by resolution, and it was repealed with our last governing body repealed it because it was inconsistent.
What point is that on the?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's the same
okay.
area under the governing body procedures, basically. You were talking about the rules and minutes where it says governing body shall determine its own rules. Basically, that falls under that. So we did have that in place, and it was repealed by the governing body, this last governing body. And so they determined that they were not going to have any governing body rules of procedure, and they would just follow Robert's rules. Robert's rules are a little bit hard to understand. I mean, you have to,
Well, you need to know them. You need to know.
right.
With
So,
all due respect, and that's one thing that I learned early on, and it was, and I learned that from Speaker Sanchez and President Pro Tem Aragon. Speaking to them, they told me, if you want to rule, learn the rules. And I've used them to my advantage by learning the rules in meetings at the community college. In my committees, I get to run the roost and rule the roost because I know the rules. So yeah, it could be disadvantageous, but Robert's Rules is a pretty concise thing, and it can be, you can take classes in parliamentary procedure in order to learn the rules, or just read those rules specific to what you want to do. They're too unwieldy. And if you're going to rule by the rules, I guess if the body chose to, as they did, and then whoever is the strongest wins. Really. Strongest willed and the strongest reader. But how should we define the rules?
I think my suggestion is that, because each governing body is going to want to have their own rules. So if they would do it by resolution, then a resolution is easy to replace. You just bring it to the council and they review it and replace it. Unlike an ordinance, takes a little bit more time. You have to publish it and go through the whole publication process, the public hearing and whatnot. So I think it's important, though, that it's identified in something, in some document. And I think the best way is by resolution, that way the next governing body can easily change those or amend them, should they wish. That's just my recommendation.
So your recommendation would be in the rules, the governing body shall determine its rules and order of business by resolution?
Correct,
That's simply by adding the word by resolution.
by resolution.
That makes sense, Mr. Chair. And how big was the last,
I believe
Okay.
maybe like 8, 9 pages.
They
Was
have
it the
that
quorum, they were, the last time was in 2000, I think it was in 2002, and then they were amended in 2005.
that was the last time they
That was
were,
the last time.
8 pages, that's quite a bit.
That's a long.
Well, by the time you get in rules of vote by majority, constitution of a quorum, setting the meeting dates.
Right.
you
The
know,
agenda,
that-
The Open
the
Meetings Act
agenda,
has to follow.
adopting the Open Meeting Act resolution. So the 8 pages isn't too
No.
much.
No,
Not compared to the whole Robert Rules of Order.
Yeah, Robert's Rules of Order, then, good luck. I mean, I use them, but I study, I mean, I don't have a life at home, you know. After my he goes to bed, I just read Robert's Rules at night.
Right. There is a kind of a subsection
I don't have a
that
life.
has to be established by ordinance, and that is to say that when it comes to the procedure for adopting ordinances and introducing ordinances, that process needs to be established by ordinance.
Where are you looking?
I'm looking at page 9, section D.
you're talking about the ordinance process itself?
The ordinance process itself, which doesn't seem to be well-defined, and we see a lot of variance when it comes to even the written formatting of what's being brought before the city council. And there's, my personal opinion, there's some
The red
issue
line.
there.
Yeah, it should be there, the red line document.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Martinez.
Question to Commissioner Reiner. So, are you saying that there's different processes to get ordinances done here at the city?
No, not a different process. I think what Commissioner Lee is talking about is what they actually bring to the council as far as the document itself, because the process is followed the same. We request approval to publish the ordinance, and we bring the ordinance forth. Now, that's up to the director. The director brings the ordinance, or the city attorney, he approves it. The city attorney's always approved all of the ordinances and all the resolutions prior to coming to city council. But I think what he's talking about is the actual document itself is not brought in the same format. Is
Every
that-
time?
If you look at how it happens at the Roundhouse, they have a legislative drafting manual, and they have an entire, I want to say, management stratum of nerds who are the absolute masters of how you draft a capital outlay proposal versus how you amend a statute versus how you would delete a statute or introduce an entirely new one, and that is specific down to the existing language of an ordinance to be amended, and it needs to be bracketed and struck through to indicate that it's being deleted, and the new language needs to be bolded and underlined, I believe. And these things were established for a reason, so that the legislators can look at it and go, oh, that's what's going on, and this is the impact of what I'm doing here, That's really not codified by ordinance. The procedure that you just described, is that codified by ordinance?
State statute.
It is statute. So
That's what
we
I thought.
actually
It's not identified
never
here.
did adopt by ordinance the procedures for introduction and adoption of ordinances then.
That's another one.
Well, the body that you're referring to is the Legislative Council Service. So everything goes to council service to be, well, it's pro forma, it's the legal review, the in-house legal review that goes through council service for its, to make sure it's meeting the legislative criteria, the language is correct, that it's not in conflict with any other statute. And that, could we not simply modify this, the governing body shall adopt ordinance, the procedure and introduction and adoption of ordinances, simply by adding after legal review? Because then you'd see if they're pro forma, if they're meeting that form that is required for ordinance. I mean, if Joe Blow comes in and says, here's an ordinance.
Well, we're not defining yet what format there is for an ordinance, so what are you going to review against?
Well, but for legal review, and the general term legal review would be against existing ordinances and/or statute. Do they comply with statute? Do they comply with, or in the conflict with any ordinance? I think it's implied that you would do that.
The
And a
idea is
legal
so that
review.
everybody knows when an ordinance is coming, okay, what is different from, or what's been amended? Can I see it just by looking at it? You know,
Right.
Right.
Is there a clear,
That's
concise
right.
summary of
You
purpose?
redline in
That-
that.
That's the red
Right.
line purpose. But
that's,
basically, a red line would be almost a quasi-legal review
Well, no.
in some respects. You're not going to look at any conflict, but I think that if we take it to a higher level by including legal review, we could specify for any conflict with any existing ordinances or statute.
Or they should be getting reviewed
By the-
for those things as a matter of course. But the format in which these things are presented to council is as of yet undefined, and the process by which these things are introduced is, we're looking at statute, and the city council has yet to satisfy their duty to enact the ordinance that defines how ordinances are introduced, how they're amended, how they're repealed, and what it looks like.
Well, how would you define that review process within Section D?
Commission Chair, if I could just interrupt really
Sure.
quickly, I'm sorry. We do have another meeting scheduled for 3:30.
And I have a meeting
Committee
at 4,
meeting.
so we got to pick this up. I'm sorry.
So they're probably going to be coming in here pretty quick.
Mr. Chair, why don't I send in writing my, whatever I also
You
have?
could, and we'd also like to invite you back, if we have this special meeting, maybe we can invite you back at the next special, because we have an hour for the mayor, and perhaps you give us an hour at that time, on the 13th?
We're planning to.
I haven't gotten confirmation on that, but
Yeah. My speaking with the mayor, he was not adverse to the 13th either.
okay.
So if we can do that, perhaps we could add that, ask the city clerk for another hour at that time. We can make that a 2-hour meeting.
Thank you, Cassandra.
Sandra, they're very light, and we want,
Who submits the formats for the, who gets the ordinance? Who gets,
The city attorney,
he gets all of them?
He gets
Once
resolutions
the,
and
once the department submits?
yes,
It would be
department
the
submitted,
directors who
Dir-
initially introduce.
correct, the directors
Okay.
submit them to the city attorney's office for review and approval.
Oh, okay. I was wondering who gets them?
make things very complicated.
I know, but it's complicated. This is not an easy system.
Jeez.
I am,
So long.
again, I want to thank you for coming today. We want to invite you back, please. I want to thank the commission.
Send us.
And then I must say that, and I kind of said it in jest to Matt, but this is a complicated task that we've undertaken here, and it's, there's a lot to what you're doing, and I thank you. I want to personally thank you for taking the time to do this, because it's hard. This is hard stuff that we're doing, And Greg is getting all the glory, and none of the other ones are getting anything from this. We're not even getting a beer.
We're all learning.
I would just like to say, may I just say,
Please.
Cassandra, I don't know you, but I need to apologize for city, for what you went through and your administrative leave. That was hard, that's a difficult thing.
Yes. It's good to see you back.
Thank you, and
you.
I want to,
And I know you don't know anything about any of this stuff.
I agree with Commissioner Madrid and what the other commissioners have said. We have a motion to adjourn, do I have a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting
Thank you, Cassandra.
adjourned. Thank you.